Dragon Ball Z is not for wimps. Fight! First, you must focus. Now, you fight!
Dragon Ball Z Budokai, available on PlayStation 2.
Well, with Sparking Zero around the corner, I thought I'd wind it back to where Dragon Ball Z began for me. It's the year 2000 in Australia, on an early morning before school. I'd throw on my favourite cartoons only to be greeted with something new.
Stand by for Dragon Ball Z. Coming next.
I was instantly hooked on this show, along with many others. And wouldn't you know it, after a couple of years, friends are telling me that a game is coming out. Dragon Ball Z Budokai, developed by everyone's favourite Dimps and published by Bandi Namco. Before I do a deep dive into this game, I want to talk about the composer, Kenji Yamamoto. You might notice that at times there won't be any music, and it was my decision to cut it all out, due to this man being caught out for numerous amounts of plagiarism.
Sure, Vegeta. This should be good for a laugh.
This was actually a pretty important game for many people, because before the time of streaming services and accessible internet, your only way to watch this was just on TV. But if something had come up and you missed numerous episodes, how were you to know whatever happened? With such example, I actually missed out on Goku's Super Saiyan transformation, and that's simply because it was just replaced by a different cartoon. I watched the entirety of the Namek saga to just miss out on the end. Controls are pretty straightforward. You have a block, punch, kick, and you can shoot energy blasts. But it's a little bit more in depth on the fact that you can sidestep, dash, and grab. And since this is also an arena fighter, you've got a pretty complete move list too. Now, I'm not going to sit here and claim that this is the most revolutionary fighting game that there is to be, or anything like that, but something this game does secure pretty well is feeling authentic to playing within the actual universe. I think Dimps had a lot of ambition, and some of it is executed. A couple of things I want to mention about Budokai's story. This game only covers the Saiyan, Frieza, and Cell arc. Boo's not here. Now, I don't have any proof, but I think this game originally was meant to cover the Boo arc as well, but possibly ran out of time in development. The reason I believe this is that you can find Majin Vegeta art within the game. As well as the different box arts to the game, you can find everyone's favourites within the art, including everyone's favourite Sopovich. Plus, also, the Great Saiyan Man is this game's secret final character. And coming from the Boo arc, well, obviously it's speculation, but it kind of feels odd having Great Saiyan Man over something like Super Saiyan 3. Unless they were always meant to adapt the Boo arc, and Great Saiyan Man was first on the list to be created, but they simply ran out of time. To me, that sounds like that makes more sense. Now, although the combat feels sluggish, I have to give Dimps a pat on the back with the game's cinematics. They hold up well, even to today. And even all the anime counterparts feel pretty true to their characters. An absolute guilty pleasure of mine within this game is within the story you have these little what if scenarios. And I'm not going to spoil too much here, but
No, not you! What are you doing? No!
now, DBZ fights have always been known to me as high-flying action with quick or even ultra-fast battles with huge energy blasts, but this game just doesn't quite have any of that. These moments are somewhat there, but just feel flat. The game does incorporate fast action battles, but it only occurs if the opponent is trying to perform the same move as you. But then you're put into a minigame and mashing buttons against your opponent. Something else I discovered within the game that really let me down is the cast of 23 characters, all somewhat played the same. Yes, visually different, but your moves or 3-hit combos or even your super moves all kind of feel the same. There's honestly only about 4 different characters in this. And now, although this game had some shortcomings, it absolutely set up the foundation to where the series was heading. But enough of Budokai 1. Let's fast forward 1 year. Dimps is still developing, and this game is deemed in many ways the ideal sequel. It took the foundations of the previous title and made the necessary upgrades to fix most of my last complaints, although still face some hurdles to overcome. It was a great effort by Dimps, and credit where credit is due. Characters felt more unique now than ever. Just the combat felt a little bit awkward at times and a bit sluggish in other moments. Now I need to mention, unlike the previous game, this has 0 cutscenes, excluding the opening. I think this decision was to stop developers from focusing on that instead of the gameplay. Now I mentioned this game covered the main 4 arcs, and it does, but probably not how you would know or expect. This story mode is laid out like a board game, and although you can canonically pick your team relevant to the story, you don't have to. This game's story very much separates itself from others because of this. It doesn't quite play out one-to-one, and that's fine because there's plenty of other games that cover the story closer if that's what you want, but it's definitely worth exploring this yourself. Who knows what you might find.
Oh, have I been brought back to life?
What is this?
Yes, you just saw the resurrection of Margin, Cell, and Frieza. This honestly left me gobsmacked. I was so confused on what was happening. Unfortunately, they're nothing more than just additional pieces for you to battle on the board, but it's a pretty cool concept. The campaign of this game is definitely its highlight. On an annual release now, 16th of November 2004. Dimps and Bandai dropped the highlight of the series, Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3. Now with 44 characters and covering the main 4 sagas, Saiyan, Frieza, Cell, Majin Buu. This game was instantly the success Dimps and Bandai needed. Critics felt this game did so much more to improve its gameplay rather than graphics or presentation. This game sold just under 2 million within the US and Japan alone. If you cared to compare critic reviews to each other, here you go. Now I'm aware that I haven't spoken about each game's story and the events that happen within them. Instead, I've more so just gone over briefly on the differences between them all. This game's story mode has an extra little treat for any fan, from being able to fly in an open world section and visit each different location, allowing the player to physically travel from A to B to relive those moments that they know from either the movies or the anime itself. Now I know that this world is more so like a mini game, but the map does actually change dependent on what is happening in the story, such as when the Saiyans arrive on Earth, or when Cell's games begin, you can actually find his tournament ring. Not all locations are story relevant. There's plenty within the world for you to still explore and find your own little secrets along the way. I mean, my playthrough within the Broly segment, I found Barbar's Palace, and well, this happened. Yes, Broly for no reason just wipes out the entire palace, and this is 100% optional. No doubt, people probably miss this. Just a little bit of exploration, and you find these kind of little gems sprinkled in through it. Since we're still talking about the story, I should probably mention that this game actually has some good replay value as well. You will be covering the main 4 sagas, but upon completing it the first time, your game can potentially change from playthrough to playthrough. For example, Goku's first playthrough, the events within the story play out with the story that you know. However, in the following playthroughs, certain choices could lead you to fighting Cooler instead of Frieza. These choices can lead you to fighting Broly or even Dragon Ball GT's Omega Shenron. Another welcomed addition to this game was the ability to swap to the Japanese dub. I don't know why this feature wasn't in Budokai 1 or 2, but it finally makes its appearance here. Some other little fun facts. This is the first game in which the story of GT is retold during the events of Z. It's assumed that the GT portion of the story only takes a few months after Kid Buu's defeat. Now this next bit I don't have any source for or anything like that, but I have it in my own headcanon that in the film Dragon Ball Super Broly, I think it pays homage to this opening on the fact that we've never seen Gogeta and Broly together before. It's obviously speculation, but if you know anything, let me know in the comments. I do read these. So I've mentioned this game's success, but what is different between this and the others? Well, the game added several new gameplay mechanics that significantly impact the action. First to note being the new teleportation counter system, which, following a simple tap on the D-pad and the X button at the right moment, will instantly teleport you right behind your opponent. Introducing this mechanic keeps fights feeling non-stop and very fast-paced. Dragon Ball Z fans will instantly recognize this to any DBZ fight. Another welcomed addition to mechanics, although divisive among my friends group, this game was the first to introduce the beam struggle, to which simply, if two characters hit each other with a massive energy attack, both beams collide and you have to spin the analog stick faster than your opponent to overpower them. Additionally, you could just mash the buttons, but it was way more anxiety inducing via stick. I've had a lot of fun revisiting these games. The Budokai series has been so much fun to revisit, and with Budokai 3, it felt like a love letter to fans, which really shocks me with how polished this game feels to learn how much cut content is also here. Now I don't know if that's because Dimps bit off more they could chew, or if that was Namco Bandai pushing their deadline, but I would love to actually see Dimps without the restriction of the publisher give it another go, because I dare say that at the time, Budokai 3 was at the peak of Dragon Ball Z games, and I'll even make the bold claim that before DBZ Fighters, Budokai 3 is Dragon Ball Z's best fighting game. And well, as per tradition, 12 months come along and there's not another Budokai game. Something just kind of felt a bit off. I was excited, don't get me wrong, but it just looked different. It wasn't the Budokai 4 that I was expecting. Instead, Budokai Tenkaichi, it's a completely new game. Bandi Namco is still publishing it, but Dimps has been kicked from the project entirely. Its new developer Spike is on the job. Either way, I had to play it. I had to get this and see what it was all about. It had all the characters I knew and loved, so could it really be that different? Well, upon launching the game in its opening cutscene, you'll see that things are a little bit off. Everyone's got this oily look to them, and the human characters have got this like uncanny feeling to them. What the fuck happened to Frieza? Like, I'm not one to normally pick on opening cinematics, but oh boy. After being introduced to all of that, I cannot wait. Well, the first thing to mention, and that you'll notice, but the game has shifted its camera perspective to be over the shoulder instead of the traditional fighting game view. The gameplay is completely overhauled. Instead of punch, kick, block, and key blast, you've now got hand-to-hand, guard, dash, and key blast still. But removing those other buttons has basically turned this into a 2-button fighter. And the Tenkaichi series actually stuck with this. But that's not a gripe, these games are actually incredibly fun to play. And that's what I found to be the biggest difference between Budokai and Tenkaichi, is that Budokai are fun fighting games, although a little unbalanced, where Tenkaichi are bad fighting games, but they're good Dragon Ball Z games. For what Tenkaichi lacks in depth within gameplay, it more than makes up for this with content and character flair. Now, there's always been a debate between which is better, the Budokai series or the Tenkaichi series. I don't think that's overly fair to compare either of them, because they're two vastly different games. It honestly comes down to what you prefer. Like, if you want a more competitive game, then you would go Budokai. But if you want a much bigger roster and are okay with characters having silly gimmicks, then Tenkaichi is your game. Now, that's not to say there's not a competitive scene for Tenkaichi, because by God, there absolutely is, but I will touch on that later on. Now, if you're wanting to know which of the two is my favorite, I'd have to pick Tenkaichi. I just had more fun, and there's just so much more to do within the games. But that's not to say that if a friend hit me up and wanted to play Budokai, I'd absolutely jump at the opportunity as well. Now, the reception to this game was kind of a mixed bag with critics. It was given a relatively positive but average review score, but there are a bunch of claims that are a little bit beyond me, such as the control scheme being too difficult to understand and confusing for new players, or difficult even for new players to pick up. I really strongly disagree with that. Tenkaichi 1's gameplay is somewhat interesting, being that melee is actually your worst option. The defensive system wasn't balanced at all, making melee practically useless. So most of the time, you're using your movement and key blasts and supers to fight. It's clunky, but still fun. Tenkaichi showed it had more to offer, but since the groundwork had been laid out and the foundations were set, once its issues were ironed out, there was plenty more they could do. I'm not going to spend too much time on Tenkaichi's story, since there's not really much to say on it. There are a couple of interesting twists and additions, but to quickly summarize it, Shenron has lost his memory, and to regain those memory fragments you have to relive the fights of the past. Once in the menu, you can choose from among a surprisingly large amount of sagas. You've got the usual suspects, such as Saiyan, Frieza, Cell, and Buu. But additionally, you have quite a few film stories. There's a little bit of GT sprinkled in there, plus the what-if scenarios where you get to play as the villains. These what-if scenarios are actually pretty entertaining and fun. Just finding out what the development team has cooked up for the player was always interesting to find out. And finally, the last playable saga is based on the original Dragon Ball. I, and possibly like many, never really got the opportunity to watch the films. Having this many stories to be able to play through was actually really nice. And I mentioned earlier that these games make up for gameplay with content. Oh boy is there content. You now have a total of 56 playable characters, plus also 90 different forms. There are a couple other nice additions as well, such as in-depth character bios, and well, yeah, I don't really have a whole lot of love for this game, and it's not because it's a bad game. I think the others just did it better. As per the Budokai tradition, 12 months pass, and we've now got Budokai Tenkaichi 2. This is where developer Spike began to really shine. They fixed the clunky, awkward gameplay with 1, and ended up adding a tag mechanic, so the game now can become a 5v5 if you want it. And that accompanied the roster growing to 129 playable characters, or 135 to the Japanese version. I do have to mention something about the Japanese version that I failed to mention from Budokai 1, but in Japan, these games are actually called sparking. But Bandi Namco thought it might be too confusing, so they treaded on the toes of the Budokai games. That's why there's so much confusion with these names. Now I'm putting a little bit of a personal bias here, but I think this game has the best story mode out of the Tenkaichi games. So much flavor and life was put into each encounter and cinematic. As you can probably guess, the story covers Z in its entirety, and now GT. They even decided to add more movie stories, and now with the addition of TV specials. I really like this story mode, but as you could probably notice, it took a little bit of inspiration from something else. It's a little bit hard not to compare this to Budokai 3's story, but considering this is a carbon copy of it, really hard not to. Maybe if I hadn't played Budokai 3's story, I'd probably be ecstatic and would love this. But honestly, the world kind of feels a bit dead. It's a bit empty and barren and, well, just undercooked. Like, don't get me wrong, it is good. There's just not really anything special to find within the worlds. What is special about this game though, and similar to the last one, this game is crammed full of fan service. Characters are more fleshed out than ever, combat has been refined, and the production value is pretty impressive too. Almost everyone has spoken word dialogue, so really reliving your favorite moments from the anime, movies, or even TV specials is pretty special. And well, aside from watching the show, probably the best way to experience Dragon Ball Z. Now I'm yet to mention it, but this game was also the first one to come out on the Wii, and there's not a whole lot of differences between the two. There's a couple of characters and stages, but I have a feeling we might be seeing them in the next title. Before I begin Tenkaichi 3, there are a couple of things that won't be returning, and I just thought I'd want to show them here.
Your man's kinda cute. Skank.
This is exciting! Don't play stupid with me, wanker!
Yeah, pretty funny, but you can see why they didn't return.
Here we go. Another one? Again? Keep playing? One more? Another one? Yes! Wanna go again? Yeah.
Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3 has online for Wii, Disc Fusion for the PlayStation 2 computer entertainment system, and over 150 playable characters. How long will you play?
Wanna go again?
Huh? What? Where?
12 months after the last title, Budokai Tenkaichi 3 is announced, and this title has some fans split on which is better between 2 and this one. More than ever, Budokai Tenkaichi 3 features 162 characters, almost the largest in any fighting game, only topped by Fire Pro Wrestling and Tobal 2. Several new notable features came to this game, such as a night and day system between stages, as well as online capabilities with the Wii version. Quickly mentioning the night and day system, dependent on who you're playing, but you can transform into the Great Ape by using the moon. Also, due to the PlayStation 2 version not having online, you were compensated with the disc fusion ability, which let the player insert BT1 or 2 as you're playing, which unlocks the story modes to those titles. Which is a really nice idea, but problematic on the fact that if you don't have them, you're stuck with the lackluster story this game actually has to offer. This game's story mode feels like a pretty big step backwards, being incredibly brief and only talks/shows key moments across all the previous sagas. I guess this is made up with the disc fusion, but again, if you don't own those games, stiff? There was a lot of care taken into the development of most of the characters, if not all of them. For such example, Future Gohan, although has 2 arms, will only ever fight with 1. Or if any Saiyan characters are on a stage during the day, they can throw a Powerball to make it become night, allowing them to transform into the Great Ape. The game is just riddled with fan service. And I know I'm being brief with this game as well, but it's so hard not to tread on what Tenkaichi 1 had already established. Things that I've deliberately left out of this video are the other game modes, because there's a lot of charm within them, and although difficult, the Ultimate Battle or even the Dragon World Tour or World Tournament modes are really fun. Frustrating at times, but genuinely fun. I really do recommend going back and replaying through all of the Budokai and Tenkaichi, excluding Tenkaichi 1, because it did the groundwork and set the foundations for the Tenkaichi series, but the other games are just better, or even more unique. After all these years, I'm glad to see Spike return with Sparking Zero. It looks pretty fun, and that's all these games needed to be. Fun, and allow you to play whoever you want. Do I think Spike will try and mix it up and make it more of a fighting game? Honestly, I hope not. I liked revisiting these titles, and even though simple, fun and engaging is what I like about the Budokai Tenkaichi series. Now, before I end this video, I said I was going to touch on the competitive scene, and to be short and sweet, pick Gogeta, Broly, or Cell. No characters to what I could find have ever been banned or not allowed. So, although these games aren't exactly balanced, apparently it's all free game, and it's got a pretty big community still today. Every now and then I still see little tournaments being held in through Discord or even at casuals. But anyway, if you like this video, feel free to let me know which is your favorite of the Dragon Ball Z games. A like and subscribe keeps the channel going, and a thank you to my Patreon supporters, notably SaggySack and Defilier.